Any other comments to that question? All right. Any other questions?
Yeah, I was just wondering, I'm with the Times-Picayune. I had read most of the documents, like from the Ocean Policy Task Force so far. And with the marine spatial planning, like so far it seems pretty bureaucratic. It's a lot of just kind of, this is what we're going to do, here's another 90-day comment period. What does marine spatial planning really mean, and what should we get out of it, and how will it benefit Louisiana? I mean, like, I guess I haven't really seen a great definition of it.
Repeat the question.
What is marine spatial planning?
And what should we get out of it?
So the question was, what is marine spatial planning and what should we get out of it? And that's an excellent question. I think that the one way to explain it is that it's a way of looking at the multiple users of a particular resource or region and balancing those interests in a way that preserves the integrity of the resources and the ecosystem that's involved. I think the only way you can really apply marine spatial planning is in a regional context. It's not something that can be applied nationally and all size fits all. It has to be something that adjusts to a specific region, specific ecosystems, specific marine protected areas, estuarine research reserves, etc. But then looks in great detail at what are the resources, what are the aspects or features of that particular area that are need to be protected and preserved in order to sustain the resources and the uses. And then in addition, as both Cynthia and Denise have pointed out, you have these conflicting authorities, various agencies that might overlap in jurisdiction, or perhaps there's a lack of clarity in where the jurisdictions are, and somehow having a process that provides an authority to unify the approach that those various agencies use in managing resources in a particular region, and basically speaking as a single voice that hopefully takes into account all the interests. So I don't know if anybody else wants to.
I have to add this, as we are sitting here right behind the river. The river is our greatest resource for restoration, and yet we have all kinds of different things that we want to do with it. And those are all very valid, very, very valid uses. We have not yet found a way to have a conversation about how we use the river for restoration, continue to navigate on the river, and continue to protect ourselves from riverine flooding in Louisiana. This is an opportunity to do that, and that the federal government is coming out with us with this is a way of getting that on the top shelf very, very quickly. And so that's what I'm optimistic. That's the kind of thing I'm going to be pushing for, to move this forward, to get beyond the bureaucracy in the document, to actually have some cases of application to show what a difference it can make.
I mean, I think that's the simplest answer. It is, even if you look at the deep waters of the Gulf, you have a lot of agencies that have conflicting authorities. You have MMS, you have the Coast Guard, you have National Marine Fisheries Service. And in the past, those three agencies, let's just take those three, don't really communicate with each other, and they often have conflicting purposes for an area. The Coast Guard may want to allow somebody to build a navigation canal, somebody else may want to put an oil and gas pipeline, and then NOAA or National Marine Fisheries Service may feel that that's a critical area for a species. And in the past, there's been no actual framework for them to sit down and sort of hash that out. Okay, would it be appropriate? Could we move this pipeline, a mile? In other words, what is the actual framework for making sure that the resource is protected, but that we can have oil and gas development and navigation? And although that seems like a simple concept, it has not been simple in the framework of the federal government. That has been a very complicated issue. And what people are hoping is that this policy will require the federal agencies to sit down in a planning sort of exercise and say, all right, this area, in its most simplistic terms, this area is appropriate for oil and gas development. This area needs to be protected, or we're not going to have red snapper grouper, bluefin tuna, whatever. So we want you to back off in terms of navigation, or, you know, and it's like Denise said, in the river, there's all this conflict. So does restoration actually impede navigation? Does use of dredge spoils, is it appropriate for restoration? Is it, you know, and I think that conversation needs to happen, and unless the federal government has a policy that requires that to happen, it's not going to happen.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. I mean, it seems like, there's going to need to be more than just, a new agency. There's going to need to be a complete overhaul of regulations in order to get this done.
Not really. If there's a federal policy that requires those agencies to sit down and talk, just as you're seeing now with the Council on Environmental Quality, bringing those agencies together, those agencies serve at the pleasure of the president. And if the president's policy is that they need to coordinate, they will be coordinating. So I think if you have a federal policy that requires those people to coordinate, which we have never had, then you will get more coordination. Will it be perfect? Probably not. But it'll be a lot better than what we have right now.
Can I add something? And we shouldn't make this that coordination is the panacea, because clearly if there are congressional authorities that are in conflict, then we still may have problems. But what we see this coordination as being identifying the art of the possible within the constraints that each individual, on missions that each individual agency has. What we really want to do is identify synergies amongst those missions and develop this for the good of the resource. What frequently happens is we think about what we can't do rather than what we can do, and I think just, well, there have been instances in my experience working on the Louisiana coast where if you force the issue and get people to actually engage, just as CEQ is now doing, that you start to shed some light on things and we start to see where we can do things together. And this is just going to make that much, much easier. And I think it's even more important probably for the areas that are solely under federal jurisdiction, because what happens in the coastal area where states have a particular role and responsibility, they can sometimes force those conversations. This is one of the reasons why having that conversation has been quite difficult relative to the river as a resource, because of the federal role relative to the Mississippi River. And so if you get to a federal resource like the Mississippi River or to the EEZ, then you don't have the states there to try and force those conversations. And so there are some examples where this can really make a difference.
I'll just add a couple points. I think both Cynthia and Denise have highlighted the fact that the governance that would underlie a marine spatial planning effort or national ocean policy is a very challenging problem, and that's one of the issues right now that's being actively debated and discussed as to what form would that governance take, at what level within the government would this be managed and directed. I guess one other point that I would say with regard to the implementation of marine spatial planning is that to a certain extent we're limited by information right now as well, and that's again my theme here today is the importance of science-based decision making in a national ocean policy, and I think the key is to have good information, the best information that you can get in order to make the best informed decisions about how to manage and protect and effectively utilize a particular resource or region. And so again, the importance of science, and that's not to say that we have to wait for all the science to be done so that we understand the system completely before we do anything. Rather, what we do is we proceed, and as we go forward, we identify where the needs are, where the uncertainties are, and then try to address those as we go forward with the implementation of such a policy.